Coming up on today's episode, we'll answer a question from a listener. We'll talk a little bit about somebody maybe the Dodgers could go after the lockout, and what should the Dodgers do at the closer position. That's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Vince Samperio, Chavez Ravine Fiends here, and this is Locked On Dodgers. We are the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. I'm Vince Samperio here, rolling solo for the day. Jeff and I are enjoying holidays and making it work as we can, and today I'm rolling solo. Not much on the Dodger front, so we're going to talk a little bit about a question from a listener and then get into a couple of dilemmas, or not dilemmas, but a couple of prospects for the Dodgers to do once the lockout is over. But before, I just want to thank you and remind you to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. We are here and free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Okay, so let's get on to a question that we got, and we've gotten a couple questions in this similar vein. Not the best not the most fun topic to talk about, but this one comes from our buddy Gus Sanchez, and he asks about Trevor Bauer, and he said he mentioned that he went on Trevor Bauer's Instagram, that he had posted in October about his legal situation, and that basically asked if he was cleared or not found guilty on this. What would be next, since he's technically a Dodger? Would the league suspend him? Would we want to bring him back? How would his teammates feel about it? All that kind of stuff. I feel like we've touched on it here and there, but not, I guess, in a while. And first things first, I would imagine that Trevor Bauer is going to get suspended by Major League Baseball, regardless of if he's charged with anything criminally, just because from what we know at this moment, from what's out there, it's enough for MLB to, put discipline. They have their own set of rules and their own wording and how things go. And from what we've seen, what happened with Trevor Bauer, it falls under that category. So you'd imagine there's going to be some kind of suspension. Now it's a matter of how long that suspension is. It's a matter of if it's kind of a pre-negotiated suspension where Bauer is not going to fight it and they'll kind of agree how it is. I would imagine it's not going to be easy, because Trevor Bauer will probably want to fight it if it's any more than he thinks it should be. He already could technically argue time served during the season when he was on administrative leave and things like that. But when it comes down to the Dodgers and how it affects the Dodgers, I can't see a way that Trevor Bauer plays for the Dodgers again. Even if whatever, it would have to take something of the proportion of everything just being completely falsified, everything being completely made up, and that was proven out there in the real world, and then that gets brought into this. I that would basically what it would take, I think, for the Dodgers and Trevor Bauer to ever reconcile. It's a matter of how long he's suspended, and when he comes off that suspension, as Jeff mentioned before, the Dodgers would be able to let him go based on the fact that they could say, hey, he hasn't pitched in so long. We don't know how he's going to be, and we have the right to let him go for baseball reasons. And then he would be free to go wherever he wants. The Dodgers in that case would still have to pay him. But like I said, depending how long the suspension is. If the suspension is a year long, they won't have to pay him for that next year. And then they would only have the final year of his contract. And, it'd be a lot easier to let him go, obviously, in that case, because his deals was declining in money based on the first 3 years, or the 3 years of the contract. So that's where it's at in terms of, I can't say I'm coming back to the Dodgers. I don't think, just from the standpoint of the Dodgers being respectful to their female fans, being respectful to everything that's gone on and everything that's happened. And even, like I said, if no criminal wrongdoing ends up coming of it, clearly there was something that wasn't quite right that was going on, and the Dodgers shouldn't stand for that, shouldn't tolerate that, and should kind of set a precedent that that's not something they want from their players or their team. I know they had issues in the past before with something with minor league, with something of this nature with minor leaguers, and I don't think they want to do that again. So that's the case. And then just real quick on the teammates, I can't imagine anyone's fighting for him. I'll say that. I don't know. I know the report was that most players probably didn't want him back. Probably the players that weren't that necessarily fond of signing him in the first place. Maybe it's very possible, but I'll say I don't think there's anyone going to be fighting for him or standing up for him. Even Walker Buehler, who seemed to have a good relationship with him and was an advocate for him coming on before last season. I don't see him sitting there and saying, "Hey, we need this guy," or "Hey, fighting for advocating for him." I think it's a matter of that's just the way it goes, and it might be better served for everyone all around if Trevor Bauer doesn't come back. So that's how I feel. Obviously, it's there's a lot more than just baseball impacted in this, and we've talked about that before. But just in terms of baseball impact, that's how I feel and how I think things will go. But obviously, that remains to be seen, and we'll see what happens. Obviously, it's not going to happen anytime soon with the lockout. So. And I don't know where MLB's investigation is at, but that's just the way it is. All right, I'm going to come back and talk about a player that we haven't necessarily talked about for the Dodgers to go after, but I guess could be an intriguing option. But first, let's talk about Built Bar. Built Bar is always not an intriguing option. It's the option for all your protein bar needs. And this holiday season, grab the protein bar that that tastes like a candy bar, even better than a candy bar. You get the best of both worlds. It's delicious and it's healthy. And they got so many flavors. Any flavor you could think of or that matches your palate, Built Bar will have it. And they give you that extra fuel you need to go get your Christmas shopping done or your holiday shopping done or whatever you need. Built Bar can help you out. And people love Built Bars. They're always, if you ask somebody that's a Built Bar person what their favorite flavor is or what they like, and they'll tell you. If you ask Jeff, he'll tell you. If you ask me, I'll tell you. I'm not going to tell you right now, but I'll tell you. So tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars in those stockings and make your holiday season that much better. And here's a little holiday secret. If you got a hot cup of cocoa, dip your Built Bar in it, get the flavors all over, mixing around, and you won't regret it. So right now you can get 15% off your order at built.com when you use the promo code LOCKED15. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, we're back and just want to thank you and remind you to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen every morning. We are here every weekday morning, so why not join us? Okay, this one stemmed. I was just trying to find stuff about the Dodgers, reading it, and there was a mailbag on The Athletic, so I stole a question from there, and it asked, what about a Kris Bryant signing? And we've pretty much put Kris Bryant, not linked him to the Dodgers. Don't think he's going to be a Dodger, but maybe it's a matter of if the Dodgers can't necessarily get the starting pitching they'd love, maybe they go about it and try to upgrade their offense. We saw it a little, not last year, but we saw it. They had a strong offense, it didn't quite work out, and the pitching didn't help as much either. But Kris Bryant is a guy that has really fallen off. He was the face of the Cubs that won the World Series and really kind of been downhill since then. He went to the Giants last year and he was all right, but he wasn't anything special. And you go on his baseball savant page and you look and, there's not a lot of things that he's very good at. He had a mediocre exit velocity on his hits. He's very low on hard hit percentage, average exit velocity. was down. The max exit velocity was the one that's a little bit higher, but not really barreling the ball. I mean, there's not much that stands out to you. Now, if you look at the numbers, 25 home runs, 73 RBI, 265 average, 835 OPS. Those are fine, but it's not something, he's not a franchise player at the moment. He's not a guy that you're going to break the bank for. And I think if the Dodgers were ever to get into the Kris Bryant sweepstakes, it would be because the lack of interest had dropped his price into the range where the Dodgers would consider it a steal, in essence. Not necessarily like 10 million a year steal, but a steal where it's maybe in the 15 to 20 million dollar a year range, or maybe he looks for a 1 year deal where he can kind of rebuild his value and get back up there. He was a little bit overshadowed by the rest of the shortstops in this. And he's not a shortstop, but he was overshadowed a little bit by the shortstops in this free agency. So he's a guy that, he gives you that versatility. He can play third base. He can play outfield. I would imagine he can play first base if he hasn't already done so. Theoretically, he could probably play up the middle if you really needed him to. And it's intriguing in the fact because we're still waiting on universal DH. The fact that he does play third base, the fact that Corey Seager is not with the Dodgers anymore, and he was always the guy that said, oh, he can move over to third base, once the time has come. Justin Turner is on the tail end of his career. He's got maybe, obviously only 1 year for sure left with the Dodgers, maybe 2, but we're not entirely sure how that's going to work out on defense at third base, how it's going to work out, health-wise. He's able to play the whole season. And a guy like Kris Bryant is, maybe a little bit more expensive Chris Taylor type, where he plays a couple positions. He maybe won't necessarily be an everyday player, but it'll be a guy that can play every day. And I don't think he's reduced to that. He might be. He would be reduced to that on the Dodgers at this point, which is why another reason why I don't think he would come to the Dodgers, or why the Dodgers are interested. But like I said, if the lack of interest, or maybe he wants to bet on himself, going to the team like the Dodgers and taking a smaller deal or a 1 year deal, rebuild your value, show what you can do. Work with Dodgers coaching, who has, been a good thing for a lot of players, and see what you can do. Now, I mean, he does fit. Necessarily, if you needed to upgrade, or you had, concerns about any position on the field right now besides second base, third base, and left field would probably be those concerns. Third base, because you don't know exactly how Turner's going to be health-wise, and he did struggle in the second half of the season last year. Left field, because you just maybe you still don't trust AJ Pollock. I'm still, I'm not going to put all my stock into AJ Pollock. He was very good last year, and he stepped up a bit in the postseason. But I'm still not putting all my stock into that, and also not all my stock into him being healthy. So, and from what we saw last year, the Dodgers could have used more players, more good players to have position player wise. We wouldn't have seen, guys like Billy McKinney getting big at bats. We wouldn't have seen Steven Souza Jr. and Andy Burns getting big at bats in the postseason. So it's a matter of like you said, strengthening. I've talked about before, strengthening your overall roster. 1 through 26, 1 through 40, whatever the case is in terms of how strong you're looking to be. You want to strengthen your overall roster. And I think Kris Bryant could fit that. And like I said, it's going to take some concessions on his end, maybe some concessions on the Dodgers end in terms of, hey, maybe we didn't want to spend 15, 20 million on another offensive player, but this guy's in that range and he can help us out. And like I said, his numbers last year were good, and he's been good. And, he hasn't been a franchise player, and that's where it kind of helps the Dodgers, because he's not commanding franchise player money. So, yeah, he would definitely, slot in where he's needed. And if the universal DH is added, maybe it's a matter of, hey, Justin Turner, we appreciate you. But we're going to let you go be DH, and maybe Kris Bryant becomes an everyday third baseman. You never know. So it's one where I still don't believe it happens, but I can see where there's a path to it happening, and where he can help the Dodgers, and where the Dodgers can maybe help him. And it's intriguing, a lot more intriguing than it was before. And I do think it's like I said, because I don't want to see Souza and Burns taking at bats in the postseason, but also there's not that much left on the starting pitching market in terms of free agency. And if you go into a trade, you're going to have to deplete yourself a little bit. So maybe it's a matter of trading and maybe you deplete yourself a little bit. Maybe Miguel Vargas, who would theoretically be one of the next third basemen up in the Dodgers farm system, maybe he gets traded for Luis Castillo or one of the pitchers from the A's. And, maybe you're like, you know what, we don't have a guy in the pipeline, so let's go sign a guy that could be in the pipeline, or let's go sign this guy and at least for the next year and see what he can do. So Kris Bryant, I'm thinking about it now. And like I said, I don't see it happening, but I like the idea. He would fill a role. And honestly, he would fill a pretty nice role for the Dodgers at this point. And, you know, for what if, depending what it costs, obviously. And that's where I'm at. And yeah, he would look good in Dodger Blue. Everyone looks good in Dodger Blue, so that's another plus, another alternative. He would also be leaving the Giants for the Dodgers, which is always another alternative, even if it doesn't seem that the Giants want him. Giants fans probably want him back because, they're trying to run things back with a team that they're not entirely sure what they're going to get out of that team in 2022. So it would be positives all around. And yeah, Kris Bryant, who knows? Maybe the Dodgers do end up getting him. I have no idea what's going to happen after this lockout. I don't know if it's going to be a flurry of deals. I don't know if it's going to be a slow moving, depending when it ends. But it's one of those where if somebody ends up being desperate when let's say the lockout ends February 1st and pitchers and catchers report in 2 weeks and guys just want to sign, maybe the Dodgers can sneak in, hey, Kris Bryant, you want a 1 year, $20 million deal maybe, and come rebuild your value and be a free agent next year and get that money. So stranger things have happened. And I think this is something that is perfectly in the realm of happening. Just how strong the chances are of that happening. Maybe I'm a little bit of the lower end, but hey, you never know. All right, going to come back and talk about one more situation with the Dodgers in terms of position, well, not position players, but the bullpen, but a specific part of the bullpen. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. And let's talk about BetOnline. BetOnline is here, better than ever. They got up more props, more odds, more lines than ever before. And they got everything you need as football season continues the march into the playoffs. Bowl season, college football bowl season's here. NBA is underway. NHL, you got everything you need to put some money out there. And BetOnline can help you out. It's the number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to their new updated website on your laptop or mobile device and sign up today. And you can get a 50% welcome bonus after your first deposit with the promo code Locked On. So to get your bonus, use the promo code Locked On, deposit some money at BetOnline, and you're all set up. 50% extra coming your way. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Another part of this Dodgers mailbag on The Athletic that I kind of stole from is a question that says, are the Dodgers looking into acquiring a closer? Kenley Jansen's a free agent. The Dodgers have Trinan, but his role as a high leverage reliever better suits him, in my opinion. And yeah, it's interesting. Do the Dodgers need a closer? We've talked about Blake Trinan kind of taking over that role. They signed Daniel Hudson, who could theoretically be used in that role. Kenley Jansen could still come back, and I still believe he may come back, if the offers aren't as fruitful as he thinks, or he cares about winning. We saw him linked to the Marlins, but realistically, the Marlins probably aren't a playoff team again in 2022, or they would take a lot to go right for them to be a playoff team in 2022. And Johnson's coming up on the tail end of his career. Do you want that one extra payday, or do you want to continue to play for teams that are good and going to play in October? And that's just where it sits, I would imagine, for Kenley Jansen. And do the Dodgers need a closer? Well, short answer is no. They don't need a closer. Need with capital letters. They don't need it. Could they use a closer? Yeah, they could use a closer for the exact reason mentioned in that question, that Blake Trinan is probably better as a high leverage reliever. Over the last 2 years, we've seen Trinan come in as early as the third or fourth inning, and close out games in the postseason. So he's a guy that can fill that role. He's a fireman type, and especially last year when he was able to get more strikeouts, he's a guy you could bring in bases loaded 1 out or bases loaded 2 outs and feel comfortable with him either no damage or limiting the damage at the very least. Last year became a big strikeout ground ball guy, which is exactly what you want for a fireman type, because you're going to usually coming in with runners on base, and you either need strikeouts to get the outs or a ground ball to get a double play and get out of the inning, or help yourself more in the inning. So I do believe Trinan's role is better suited as pitching when the Dodgers need him to pitch. But I will also add that I don't believe, even if the Dodgers don't sign a bona fide closer or trade for a bona fide closer, and Blake Trinan is technically the closer next year, I don't believe that Dave Roberts wouldn't use him in those fireman type situations if needed, based on what we've seen and based on the fact, with Kelly Jansen the last few years, it kind of came down to the fact, that you kind of needed him to be the closer because he wasn't good enough to be in the bullpen if he wasn't just the closer. Last year was a little bit different. He probably could have been a reliever, any time in the later innings. He could have been a setup man. He could have been a, high leverage reliever last year, just the way he was pitching, other than a few hiccups. But, 2019, 2020, borderline, at some points in those seasons, he probably wasn't good enough to be in the bullpen. And if he's not your closer and you're paying him $16 million to be a mop-up guy, that's not necessarily the case. And it's also, a little bit of ego. As we saw, Dave Roberts using him in situations that probably most of us wouldn't have used him in, because he has trust and faith in him. And we're a little bit more skeptical because we've seen him not be that great in such situations. And, credit to Jansen. He really turned it around last year, especially after the little hiccups after the All-Star break. He really became shut down the rest of the year. He was absolutely lights out in October, and, might have earned himself that extra payday. Whether it comes from a winning team or not is probably what's going to determine where he ends up going or how he feels. And that's something he has to figure out. But I do think the Dodgers could use a closer or a guy that's kind of set in that role. Like I said, to keep Jansen and even Daniel Hudson, keep them free for other things. You have Vesia, you get Caleb Ferguson back, you get Tommy Kahnle back. Theoretically, the bullpen is a strength at this moment for the Dodgers, but you could always add another, more strength to that strength. Craig Kimbrell was mentioned in this question. I don't think it's a matter of the Dodgers giving up any assets for a closer. I don't think that makes sense at all. Just based on what they have and based on the fact if they want somebody that can be a closer at least for the next year, you can throw some money at Kelly Johnson and see what happens. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Like I said, I would not give up any assets for a closer, even if I guess maybe like Liam Hendricks or Josh Hader. Maybe you give up some assets for a guy like that who changes things. Maybe more so Hader because he can go multiple innings and things like that. But like I mentioned, the bullpen is a strength at this point, and there's no reason, if you're not upgrading the overall bullpen, there's no, if you're not upgrading significantly, there's no reason to give up any assets, especially since you might have to give up assets in a potential trade for a starting pitcher. And you're not that the Dodgers, they're not running thin, but they are running thinner than they have in the past. And even though some of the guys have stepped up and kind of moved themselves into positions of being better prospects, it's still not something you're necessarily looking for or waiting to happen. You want those guys to develop and become players that contribute to the team on the field, not necessarily, there's guys that are going to contribute to the Dodgers as assets that are traded away for big names or positions of need. And there's guys in the farm system right now that are going to contribute to the Dodgers on the field and maybe both. We saw Josiah Gray. He contributed a little bit on the field, not as much as maybe we thought originally. And then he contributed to bringing the Dodgers, Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. And, you can argue whether that, you would have still made that trade knowing what happened, but that's just the nature of the game. And that's just the nature of the beast of when you make trades. And as we've seen from Andrew Friedman, if they need something at the deadline and they're in position to be a top contender for the World Series, he's going to go out and do it. And for the most part, he's done it almost every single year and gotten one of, if not the best player available at every deadline that he's been a part of. So we kind of strayed away from the closer talk, but that's basically where I'm coming down to. Don't give up assets. If you want to sign Kenley Jansen, I don't know. I personally don't know if there's any other closer types, but if it's not Jansen, I don't imagine they go after anyone else, like I said, because their bullpen's already a strength. They're getting guys back. And, if even if guys that weren't good last year can step back up, that'll help out. Victor Gonzalez being one of the main ones. And then, like I said, Ferguson, Canely, you got Daniel Hudson now. You got Blake Trinan. You got Gratterall, who was really good in the postseason and later in the year. You've got a lot of guys, a lot of arms that are going to give you some big innings there in the later innings. And, you're set. So do you need a closer with capital letters? No. Could you use a closer? Yeah. And I think that's where the Dodgers are at. And I think it might be Kenley Jansen or bust in that front. If they don't get him, hey, you know what? Next man up. If they do get him, hey, or the band's back together and let's rock this thing. So that's all I got for today's episode. Appreciate you for being here. Appreciate you guys for listening, for making us your first listen every single weekday morning. We're here, free, available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. You can also find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. The DMs are open on all those accounts. You can always get a hold of us there. You can always get a hold of us via text or email or voicemail, text or voicemail at 323-863-5625 or via email lockedondodgers@gmail.com. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Text My Device Play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.